Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, StayNTouch Product Enhancements, version 5.34, Stationery expanded to include invoice number and folio labels, introduction of invoice search by deposit invoice, and more, presented by StayNTouch implementation consultant, Tyrus McGlone. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at StayNTouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of the StayNTouch Cloud PMS version 5.34 product release. In this webinar, we will demonstrate the header added to CSV files for scheduled reports, scheduled exports, and custom exports, highlight deposit invoices added to invoice search, illustrate that the guest balance report is now clickable, review invoice number and folio label added to Stationery, identify pool balance amount for guest entity via StayNTouch Guest Kiosk, explain that StayNTouch Guest Kiosk and StayNTouch Guest Mobility will now trigger only one email, even if multiple invoices are generated under the guest entity. And finally, we'll discuss updates to Flow when all charges are routed or no charges exist for StayNTouch Guest Kiosk. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Tyrus, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. All right. Good morning, everyone. As Erin so kindly mentioned, my name is Tyrus McGlone. I am an implementation consultant here for StayNTouch. So as she mentioned also, I'm going to go over some of the latest and the greatest that we have for StayNTouch PMS, StayNTouch Cloud PMS, sorry. So one of the things I wanted to discuss first, mainly everything's going to be financials today, but the very first thing I want to discuss is the new CSV header that we've added to our custom exports, our scheduled reports, and scheduled exports. So to see the actual CSV header, it's just one option that you would actually click on to activate. I'm going to simply come to the menu option, reports. Again, this is only for a scheduled report export or a custom export. So I'm going to come to schedule report / export. Now, these are actual schedule reports that I currently have activated. If I wanted to just add a new a new schedule report, I'll simply come to new report schedule. Again, this is only if you are using a CSV file report or export. So I will come to, let's say, business on the books. I know that that for sure is a CSV file. And just beneath your settings and parameters for your time period, you will see include CSV header. This will just be a standard default header, which includes your hotel name, your hotel date, and etc. I actually have an image here that I could share with you. So this is an example of an actual a CSV header that will show up on your report or export. So again, your hotel code, your hotel name, the generated date, generated time, and the name of the report. Again, this is if you are doing a CSV file for any type of report, export, or custom report. All right. Next on the list will actually be deposit invoice search. So inside of our financial section, if I come to menu, financials, and we have the invoice search, we've now added the ability to search by deposit invoice. So if you have any of those deposits or deposit numbers that have been or that are on the books for your PMS, we now have the ability to search by that deposit invoice in this search bar. Now, this is something that is actually a feature that has to be activated. So what you would simply do is contact your CSM, which is your client success manager for StayNTouch, and we will be glad to activate that for you. All right. Next, I am going to go back to reports. I'm going to click on new report. One thing we've added is the ability to click on guest name or account names in the guest balance summary report. So many of you guys are probably familiar with this, with the arrivals report, in-house guests, that the actual names are clickable. We've added that clickable functionality now inside of the guest balance summary. So if I just simply click on or simply type in guest, I'm going to go to guest balance report. And I'll simply run this report out. And again, you have the ability to search either by account number, actual guest, or both. I'm going to run this report. And if you ever see, of course, in progress, this just simply means that the report is taking maybe a few seconds longer. We do have a refresh option if you ever see this in progress. We're going to come to the refresh option, which is just beneath the hamburger menu. And I'll open this report. And again, this is the list of accounts. It's going to show accounts first, and then it will proceed to actual guest names. I have tons of accounts here in my system. Again, if I were to click on either of these accounts or guest names, it actually takes me to that actual folio or the actual stay card for that guest. To go back to that same report, simply hit the reports icon, and it takes you back to that particular report. All right. We've also added the we've also added a new setting inside of our stationery. The setting is called General Invoice Settings. So I'm going to come to the menu option, Settings. Again, when it comes to anything in settings, this is more of a managerial functionality. So everyone may or may not have permission to go into the managerial settings in the back end. But if you do have permissions, it's going to be under Settings, Hotel and Staff, Stationery. And if I come down to Invoice, again, the newest tab that we've added is the General Invoice Settings. Inside of this tab here, we actually have two additional fields, which is basically called the invoice number label and also the folio number label. These are actual customizable fields, so you can actually place whatever you want inside of this field, but it's there for your records if needed. All right. Now, for those properties that are utilizing our StayNTouch guest kiosk for that self check-in experience, we now have the ability to pull guest bills on that particular kiosk. Now, these are any bills that are going to be guest facing. So I'm actually going to show you an example in just 1 second. Let me bring the screen over here. All right, so if you can actually see my screen here, we have the ability, again, if you have the StayNTouch self-serve kiosk, you can actually go in and you can search for your bills, you can settle your bills. So as a guest, if I have bill 1 or bill 2, multiple bills on my account, I can actually settle them out on the actual StayNTouch guest kiosk. Once the bills have been completely settled, at the last page, you will actually get a settlement that your bills have been settled, basically. Now, right now, this currently says, hooray, all bills are settled. As you guys may know, this is actually customizable. We can always change the verbiage on your StayNTouch guest kiosk. All right. And one of the last two things I want to discuss for StayNTouch guest kiosk and StayNTouch guest mobility, if the guest does have multiple bills or multiple windows and multiple folios that can be interchangeably, we'll use interchangeable. If they have multiple of them, they can actually, well, they only get one email. Previously, guests had maybe 2 or 3 bills on file. They will receive multiple emails from StayNTouch. This has now been minimized down to 1 bill. And when you open that email, I'm sorry, 1 email, when you open that email, it actually displays multiple bills on that guest account. All right. And last but not least, during the checkout process, if the guest has multiple bills, during that process, if they are, let's say, maybe a comp reservation, or if the guest bill, if the guest stay is connected to a company profile, it will no longer ask you to update any type of address. The same thing for a guest mobility functionality. If they're utilizing their mobile phones, it will not ask them to update their email address if the guest stay has been comped or if it's attached to a company profile, simply meaning it's probably routed to that company. All right, Aaron, I'm actually going to hand it back over to you for any questions and comments from today's session.
Great. Thank you, Tyrus, for that insightful presentation. I'd now like to turn over the floor for questions. So remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So the first question is, do we need to contact our account manager if we want to activate the deposit folio in the invoice search?
Great question. Yes, the answer is yes to that, Aaron. You will need to contact your client success manager for StayNTouch Cloud PMS, and again, they will be glad to activate that functionality for you.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is, will routed bills be available for guests to view on the kiosk?
Great question as well. So for the kiosk and retrieving your bills and settling your bills, routed bills will not be available. These are only guest-facing bills. So for an example, if you have a guest that actually has an Expedia, maybe virtual card on file, and the room and tax charges are routed to that actual virtual card, the guest will only see the bill for incidentals, which is typically bill number 1. So if any charges have been routed, guests will not have access to that particular bill. They only see bills that they are responsible for paying. If anything is routed or attached to a company card, that will not show for the guest.
Great. And so that's all the questions I see for now. I'm going to give everyone a few more seconds. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. One second. All right, so today we demonstrated the header added to CSV files for scheduled reports, scheduled exports, and custom exports. We highlighted deposit invoices added to invoice search, illustrated that the guest balance report is now clickable, reviewed invoice number and folio label added to Stationery, identified pool balance amount for guest entities via StayNTouch guest kiosk, explained that StayNTouch guest kiosk and StayNTouch guest mobility will now trigger only one email, even if invoices are generated under the guest entity. And finally, we discussed updates to flow when all charges are routed or no charges exist for StayNTouch guest kiosk. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at aaron.fisher@staintouch.com. Thanks again.